All right, let's talk fantasy football playoffs. More importantly, prepping for the fantasy football playoffs and doing everything within your power to give your team the best chance to win every single week. If you play with defense slash special team in your fantasy leagues, then this video is for you. I'm going to give you the best streaming options for every week of the fantasy football playoffs. I'm going to give you the top 10 best matchups in each week and my favorite of the week streaming options. Defenses that should be available in almost every one of your leagues. Do me a favor, drop a like, subscribe if you like the content, and comment down below your current record and if you think you're going to make the playoffs, or maybe you're watching this and you're prepping for the playoffs because you know that you are in. All right, let's look at week 15. And more importantly, before I get to week 15, a quick tip for you. If you're going to try and add a defense for your playoffs, let's say your playoffs start week 15, which is when ours start. What you want to do is you want to add your preferred defense for week 15 at least a week beforehand, if not 2 weeks beforehand. Of course, only if you have an extra bench spot, but at minimum in week 14, you will want to pick up your defense for week 15. You do not want to be heading into the playoffs and then battling with everyone else on the waiver wire for the best available defense. Quick tip, okay? All right, let's look at week 15. I'm showing you the top 10 easiest matchups that week. That's right, right now the Rams, who would have thought, one of the best offenses all year last year, the Rams are currently the best matchup for a fantasy defense. So you can see from 32 all the way down, 32 being the easiest, all the way down to 23 being the 10th easiest. I'm going to tell you a couple matchups that I like before I'm going to give you my streamer of the week, my preferred defense, my preferred streamer, if you will. I really like the Packers. Good defense. They got playmakers all over the field, and the Rams are giving up a ton of turnovers. Matthew Stafford, I believe, is top 3 in interceptions this year, and I don't see that stopping without Cooper Kupp. This offense looks stagnant, and I think it's going to continue to look stagnant. I also like the Colts, or rather the Vikings matchup. That defense, I know it just got blown out by Dallas, but that defense has improved both on the ground and in the air. And even though Matt Ryan is looking better, he, as well as Matthew Stafford, have thrown a lot of interceptions this year. Of course, I love the Eagles matchup, but they're probably already rostered in your league. And I like the Cardinals matchup as well versus the Broncos, which have been a very stagnant offense. The Cardinals have some playmakers, man. They can make some plays, especially if Budda Baker is going to be healthy. But my favorite stream of the week is going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Carolina Panthers. They're currently rostered in just 14% of sleeper leagues, so they should definitely be available in most of your leagues. And the Panthers, which will be their matchup in week 15, give up the 4th most fantasy points to defenses in fantasy football. And they're going to have one of Baker Mayfield, PJ Walker, or Sam Darnold starting. So you can almost guarantee there will be some sort of turnover in this game. And what are we really looking for with our defense slash special team? Well, we're looking for, can they create sacks? Can they create interceptions, general turnovers? Can they convert those into touchdowns? Do they have a kick returner that can return those for the kick returns for touchdowns as well? Because that will attribute to your points as well. So Carolina, at this very moment, as I'm recording this, they currently give up the 11th most interceptions per game and the 13th most fumbles per game. Both of those categories in the top half of the league, which would be, the worst case scenario for them. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh, the defense that you'd be streaming, forces the 12th most turnovers per game, even in a stint without JJ Watt. Minka Fitzpatrick will be back to his old ways. And speaking of TJ Watt, let me show you the impact he's had on this team. He is now healthy, so you should expect to have him here in week 15. Let's look at the Steelers per game averages with TJ and without TJ. So as a defense, this is what they have done with and without him. With him, they're averaging 3.6 sacks a game. Without him, about 1. Interceptions, they're up with TJ. Forced fumbles, they're up with TJ. Total turnovers per game, up with TJ. Defensive touchdowns a game, up with TJ. And the fantasy points per game are massively up with him compared to without him. Almost 11 more points per game. with TJ Watt on the defense. So I really like the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think this defense is much, much better with TJ Watt. When he's able to apply pressure, that helps the cornerbacks, that helps the safety, that helps the linebacker. It gives the quarterback less time to throw the ball, and typically it means they make worse decisions. So in week 15, again, I gave you a couple options that I like, but my favorite streaming option, streaming meaning available in most leagues. Again, the Eagles are great. They're fantastic. You would prefer them, but they're probably already rostered. So this is about streaming options. My favorite one for week 15 is a Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, let's look at week 16. Again, you can see the top 10 matchups for week 16. Look, there's a couple that I really like here in week 16. Obviously, again, the Bills. I imagine the Bills are rostered in every single league. They play the Bears. Even though the Bears have been much better, I anticipate them being able to force some turnovers. I like the 49ers here versus the Commanders, but again, a defense that I believe will be highly rostered in most of your leagues. And I also like the Broncos versus the Rams. So those are a couple options that I really like. But my stream of the week here in week 16 would be the Tennessee Titans versus the Houston Texans. The Titans are currently rostered in 30% of sleeper leagues. So again, streaming options, the Titans will be available in most of your formats. Meanwhile, the Texans give up the third most fantasy points to defense/special teams. And Davis Mills, while being a really fun story this year, and really since he's been drafted, he's been quite subpar with his play. Currently has the same amount of interceptions as touchdowns with 11 interceptions, 11 touchdowns, while also being 30th in the NFL in QBR. And Houston currently has the 7th most interceptions per game in the NFL. In the last 2 games that they've had, they've given up 10 points to the Giants defense and 19 points to the Washington Commanders. So this offense is completely unraveling. Dameon Pierce, again, another fun story, but he can't carry the offense on his own. And meanwhile, the Titans are averaging the 6th most sacks per game as Jeffrey Simmons, almost said Jeffrey Wilson because of Jeff Wilson, as Jeffrey Simmons is having an all-pro year. Mike Vrabel always has his defense ready, a very respectable coach. That defense isn't going to be caught off guard. He's going to have them ready to play in week 16 in a week that's going to matter for AFC playoff picture. So I really, really like the Titans here versus the Texans in week 16. Now, again, keep in mind, maybe you can't get the Steelers in week 15. Do you have an extra bench spot? Can you roster the Titans in week 15 and be ready for week 16, assuming that you get to the next round of the playoffs? You have to be playing a little bit of chess, not checkers, here in the fantasy playoffs. All right, in week 17. All right, so let's say you make it to the dance. You make it all the way to the fantasy championship, which I hope is in week 17 for you. You don't want it to be in week 18 because a lot of teams rest their starters in week 18. No fantasy football league should have a championship decided in week 18. All right, here's the top 10 matchups in week 17. Now, I'm not going to tell you to start the Chargers because their defense is terrible. They're getting wrecked by every single team. I'm not going to tell you to start the Chiefs because while they have a couple playmakers, they're still one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Certainly same thing with the Lions, and certainly same thing with the Browns. So I like the Bucks, but I assume they're going to be rostered in most leagues by this point. I really like the Bucks versus the Panthers for all the reasons I mentioned before. I like the Dolphins, but that's assuming that Chubb is going to kind of catch fire and start helping that defense out a little bit. But my favorite stream of the week is actually the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Houston Texans. Now, again, keep in mind, if you keep this video like in a saved file or wherever you want, you can watch this a week before every one of these weeks and add the defense that you want for the next week, just 200 IQ plays. The Jacksonville Jaguars currently rostered in only 4% of sleeper leagues. You already know this, but the Texans, reminder, they gave up the 3rd most points to defenses. We talked about how Davis Mills currently has 11 interceptions on the year. Houston throws the 7th most interceptions per game, and how teams have been dominating the Texans in the past 2 matchups, 10 points to the Giants, 19 points to the Commanders defense. And for the Jags side of this, because we talked about the Titans side of it in week 16, but here in week 17 for the Jags side of it, they currently have been averaging the 10th most takeaways per game and have had 6 games with multiple turnovers or multiple sacks on the year. And again, kick returns and punt returns, they're not all that predictable at this point. There's not a Devin Hester in the league. I know Cordell Patterson just broke the record, but there's not really someone that you can point to right now that you want to focus on purely kick returns and punt returns. But what we want to focus on is, can they force interceptions? Can they force sacks? Can they force turnovers? And the Jags have been able to do that. They have been an above average fantasy defense this year. Multiple games over 20 fantasy points. I like this matchup for them in week 17, which I'm sure they're going to be competitive as they're still trying to build around Trevor Lawrence, still trying to prove that defense. The first overall pick is going to want to show what he can do at the end of the season as well. So these are my favorite streams every week of the fantasy football playoffs. Now, if you don't play with defense / special teams in your leagues, which a lot of leagues don't, then like, good on you. That's fine. But there are still some teams, still some leagues out there that do play with defense / special team, the old, the classic leagues. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. But we wanted to make sure to give you and equip you with every piece of information that you need to make the right decision heading into the fantasy football playoffs. Again, do not forget those couple things that I said there. You do not want to be in a position where you are streaming a defense the week of. You want to pick them up the week before if you can manage it on your roster. So don't forget those things. Comment down below how you feel about getting to the playoffs, if you're confident that you'll get there, or if you're already there, tell me your most difficult start sit in the playoffs. Like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you in a future video. All love.
Yo, what's good? Thanks for watching. We got a lot more videos.
A lot more.
If you want more videos,
watch it.
You can also subscribe
right now
if you want to.
You need to.
And lastly, don't forget that you can sign up to support the show and get exclusive content by going to patreon.com/fantasylandfam.